nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First-rate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Managing Madrid podcast. With so much talk about our coaching this season, I thought we might as well revisit the person who we've tapped up to be our head coach next season, Xabi Alonso. Is he still the right fit for us? A lot of reports say he's going to be the right man. Today we have a special guest on, LeConte. LeConte, welcome.
Thank you guys for having me. It's a real pleasure, and I can't wait to start the discussion, I guess.
Yeah, so this was all sparked when I was saying, hey, we need Alonso back, and you tweeted at me all the way on Twitter. I'll pull up the tweet in a second, but you tweeted, I don't think he's the ideal fit, you said. And so I guess you want to briefly introduce yourself. You've been watching Alonso. Just give the audience like a 30-second primer on yourself.
Yeah. So basically, I'm just another Twitter account, a bit of analysis. I used to do my own content, and I used to have content back on Alonso's days as Real Sociedad B manager. I used to watch him back then. I was coaching at that time and under 8 teams. I don't think that matters, but some of the things that he was struggling with, I was struggling with. So I ended up watching him a bit more than I normally would with another coach, just to see if he can figure it out or not. To this point, I think that I kind of know Alonso as a coach pretty well, and I think that I can do a good job of explaining where I stand on Alonso and Madrid, the whole thing, because I do understand that there's a narrative there, which we need to break it down. And
there is a big narrative. There's no question it's a narrative, and it has taken its own life, whether it's reality or not. And, you know, if you were on YouTube, I just shared the screen showing the tweets that sparked it. So we're going to get into all that and more on this episode of the Managing Madrid podcast. And I'm just going to play this fire intro I have from the Real Deal days to remind you all this is the real deal. Now, if you know me, you know that we've done 2 episodes on this channel, or on the Real Deal channel when it was still the Real Deal, and those will be linked in the show notes on the website and on Twitter. But the first one was talking about whether Xabi Alonso or Zinedine Zidane is better placed to lead us forward 1 year ago when we were discussing Ancelotti's future, when we were playing badly last October. And at that time, the narrative that took place, or what we concluded, was that Zidane may not coach the press as aggressively as Alonso. Maybe out of possession, Alonso will be more inventive. Both are good options, but we would prefer Alonso. Then we did one more follow-up where a positionism, relationism episode going over how Ancelotti's relationism maybe optimizes our players uniquely, and how Alonso is a more positionist coach. Maybe he'll struggle to optimize the Brazilian talent in our squad the same way. Now the narrative has come full circle where I'm pushing the idea that Alonso is the perfect man to coach Tchouaméni. He'll give our midfielders the build-up options and structure they need. I believe out of possession, he's more sophisticated than Carlo, maybe more aggressive. In possession, I definitely think he will give the players more options, augmented by the fact that as a player, he was not as press-resistant as Cruz. So maybe he doesn't see the obvious options. As a player, he didn't see it as simple to break the press. So maybe he gives his players more options. That is the narrative right now, and you are here to destroy it. So you have at it. Where do you want to start?
Destroy it, but I'm more.
Sorry, you were muted briefly. I just unmuted you. Go ahead now. Just go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I'm not really here to destroy that narrative. Inherently, I do agree with some of the points being made, but ultimately, not reaching the ending point, but I want to say that Alonso is more similar to Ancelotti than any other coach, really. So there are a few things which Alonso does better than Ancelotti, especially with the pressing, especially with the way how Leverkusen are set up of the ball. And I think that before we dive a bit deeper, as you showed before, this isn't really result oriented. Because Leverkusen are not doing as good right now, it doesn't change my opinion on anything, or it hasn't. When they were doing well, and them right now, it just doesn't have any correlation, really. I'm not result based. I'm not looking at the results. One of my major issues with Alonso has been their on the ball approach. And of course, that's an issue that I have with Ancelotti as well. But I believe that with Ancelotti's experience, he's better optimized to ultimately put these players on better positions depending on circumstances. Ancelotti is very game state dependent as a coach on the way how he sees the game. That's my opinion on it. And Alonso kind of seems to be following the same patterns. Alonso doesn't really stick to what completely works for him. So let's say if they played Bayern Munich, I'm going to take that game as example. Alonso stayed very deep and he just tried to make use of their high line going long. He used three center backs, two wide ones would split, and Jonathan Tah would usually end up actually being isolated. One of my biggest problems with Alonso still is the fact that the central center back has tendencies of being isolated when it comes to getting the ball. I thought that Alonso would address that problem with addition of Aleix García, which they signed this summer. But presumably right now he seems to be out of the team because it's just my idea, but he cannot really make up for some of the tactical deficiencies of the ball that Alonso has. Therefore, he's not fully being optimized. In a normal world and on normal expectations, Aleix Garcia and Granit Xhaka would have been a very good partnership. Leverkusen would have had more control over the games and their games wouldn't be swinging as much as they do. But whenever you watch them, they just swing. There isn't really a team that's settled to be able to control and suffocate the opponents on the ball. It's fully reliant on team athleticism, on team's ability to gain the ground, stiffen up the opponent, and if they're unable to do that, then they're not going to be as efficient as they would normally be, or how Alonso believes it to be. They're just facing a lot of conundrums, which, if we're talking about Alonso as a Real Madrid coach, those problems are just going to amplify, because you're going to be having to deal with much bigger egos. You're going to be having to deal with much higher pressure to begin with to get the results, because that's what the fans demand. Carlo Ancelotti, for example, as you mentioned previously, we were talking about him getting sacked last season. He won the Champions League by the end of it. We're talking about him getting sacked now. It's just the reality of where we are as a club. And Alonso is very new-ish as a coach. What he achieved last season was great, amazing. I'm never going to put it down on Bayern Munich were bad, and I'm not going to put it down on they got a lot of late wins. A win is a win. And he did show a lot of promises as a coach. Compared to his La Real B days, Alonso is really a different coach, at least in my eyes. He used to struggle with the most basic things at La Real. This is where kind of like my theory and the way how I perceive football kind of changed. Player quality matters a lot, and player profile does matter even more. You mentioned somebody like Tchouaméni under Xabi Alonso. Well, there is not really one player on Bayer Leverkusen's team who plays like Tchouaméni, who has that profile. So for me, it's very hard to comment on it. And based on his coaching style, I just don't see it. because Leverkusen are, for the most part, very wide-oriented. That's why they play most of the time with three at back. They're very wide-oriented. They want to clog the central zones once they've pushed the ball forward. And again, it kind of brings me to the idea that Tchouaméni needs to play more like he played with France at the World Cup. He needs to be the heart of everything. And with Alonso or Ancelotti, he's just not going to be that. Those are the type of coaches who are not really going to give retention of the ball that much of an emphasis. Example, Real Madrid this season is overly vertical. I'm not saying that Bayer Leverkusen are overly vertical, but where they return the ball, where they move with the ball, it's usually by using the two players high up, which normal cases would have been Boniface and Wirtz. Two excellent players at receiving on the pockets, two excellent players at playing with their back, and also being able to bring their teammates in. Then you have somebody that I like to call kind of like a sniper in Granit Xhaka. At Arsenal, he was not used the same way how he was used for the national team, and Alonso did relay that, which I give him props as a manager. And you're seeing a different version of Granit Xhaka, which should have really been a thing on his career much earlier. So those three players, this triangle that I like to call it, are the keys to Bayer Leverkusen's play. It's not just Boniface or Wirtz. It's mostly the way how he's using those tandems. There isn't really a real number 9 there. Even when Patrick Schick plays, he plays as a runner. He comes in to cover for that void that Boniface was going to leave when Boniface is not playing, or Wirtz. So Alonso's rotations are often well profiled, but after, especially this season, even with last season, the on-possession play just leaves a lot to be desired. Do not get me wrong, the build-up is clean, is quite clean, but Alonso does set up good traps. But I just don't see them working at a club like Madrid with the players that Madrid has. I don't think it does translate as well when it comes to the profiles on the Madrid squad. At least this would be the first part. So if you have something to jump in, please do.
Yeah. So I guess one thing I'm wondering is so you've been watching since Sociedad, and last season, there were a lot of comebacks. The game state thing, for me, that's something I like, I guess, early on. I don't mind a team that plays a certain way until they're winning 2-0, and then the last 30 minutes you shut up shop. I don't mind playing in a block. However, with, I guess one thing is, you say that Aleix García is coming to the team, and with him and Xhaka, they don't slow the game down and control it, and that they didn't do the same last season either. So is that because Garcia? Do you think Garcia and Xhaka together, like, they're not athletic enough? Do you think many top managers would struggle to play them both in the same midfield? Like, you have a more athletic midfield here at Real Madrid. These players are, and maybe they're not, like, even if they don't need central circulation, like, even if they're not going to be featured, they're very capable of making switches of play. Like, technical floor is very high. So even in a wide-oriented system, they're capable of, like, playing a role, and they're much more athletic. So how much of it is down to Garcia not being athletic enough, or do you think that's where Alonso just loves his out of possession midfielders?
I mean, Alonso went back to Andre, which kind of tells me that he just loves his midfielders to be athletic. He loves his midfielders to be able to cover a lot, and also do, it's bad to say, but the basics on possession. Aleix Garcia is a bit of more like extraordinary with the ball, but lacking on the other side, especially on the physical side of the game, which Alonso's strategy often relied on them winning those 50-50s, on them being able to get on those quick breaks. With somebody like Aleix, you definitely get a better result in somebody like Michel's, who for me would have been a better choice than Alonso to be a Madrid coach setup. Alonso I don't think he has, as of right now, everything nailed for the top manager. Do I think that if you bring him in Madrid and he does well? Well, yes and no, because some of his Leverkusen problems are prevalent here. And if you're going to switch the coach, you want a little bit of a change. You don't want two of the same. For example, a lot of people mix Zidane and Ancelotti being the same. So when Zidane left, we appointed Ancelotti. People went like, oh, more of the same. First game, you immediately saw huge differences of their tendency on what they want to do. But Alonso and Ancelotti, for me, would feel more of the same. Maybe Alonso would have optimized the team a little bit better on collective level by sacrificing some of these players' individual levels. So I want to tackle into something because it became a big thing. It was Thierry Henry's piece on Kylian Mbappe against AC Milan, where it's Jude making the runs and it's not Mbappe. By design, by just knowing Ancelotti, that was the plan. I don't think that it was Mbappe who decided that it was going to be that way. But I just think that Ancelotti looks at the player's strengths. When you took Bellingham, his best trait was the runs. Basically, that's why Pep wanted him to replace Gundogan. That's why Klopp wanted him. Bellingham is an all-rounder, don't get me wrong. But what you're going to get from Bellingham, the best, in my own opinion, is his timing and his ability to get on the box. Therefore, Ancelotti wanted to utilize that. That meant sacrificing Mbappe's runs for Jude to be able to enter those zones. Thierry Henry made some fair points, but when he's questioning why Mbappe is taking those decisions, he should have thought first about the profiling of the players and who the coach is. Usually those are going to be coaching decisions, especially when you see them as repeatedly as we saw them. So it might have been Mbappe's lack of understanding of the offside position as the number 9. What might have triggered it due to what happened against Barcelona? Might have been PTSD from that, because we have seen Ancelotti kind of overly react to some results. But for the most part, now going back to Xabi Alonso, I don't think you're going to get too much of a change for it to be worth it. That is my stance on it. I don't think you're going to get too big of a change, too big of a pattern shift, not a cultural shift, a pattern shift where players that are loving the current coach and are doing everything for him, at least from what we're seeing, are worth to be put on that position. This is where I stand. I just think a lot of deficiencies are there with Alonso's setup, and inability to control the flow of the game for long stretches is my biggest concern, which is the same with Ancelotti.
How are one concern with Ancelotti right now is that the quality of these players out of possession is so high outside Mbappe. Yes, Mbappe is weak, but the rest of the midfield it's all generational. Modric is not an athlete. Goulet is not an athlete, but Camavinga, Tchouaméni, for a 6, Tchouaméni is pretty athletic, and then Fede is pretty crazy. So even if we don't improve fully in possession, do you think the out of possession gap is large from what you've seen? Well, I think the most intriguing thing I've seen is like how the team changes the way they play depending on game state. We do that, but we do it emotionally. We react like it's like someone punched us in the face and we want to punch them back. When Alonso does it, it's different. It's like he presses a button, he pauses on the menu, he goes and changes the tactics. It's like FIFA. It's like a video game. And it feels a bit Nagelsmann. Nagelsmann seems to have more of that where like even Pep has done it, but Nagelsmann really seems to be a fan of the quick soccer timeouts where you change your setup. He changes maybe back 3 to back 4, and then the whole game looks different. Do you not think there's a big gap there? Or I guess walk us through that too. How do you think that's different to Carlo? Is it something that you don't do?
I think, well, a lot of emphasis has been put on out of the ball system, of course. But I'm also like you mentioned the players, so I don't want to go through that. This team has insane physical ceiling. I don't think any team can really even match it, even come close to it. Actually, not match it, even come close to it, let alone match it. So if you get somebody like Alonso, you're very likely that you're going to get a better out of possession play where the press is triggered between all the players aligned rather than individuals trying to make up, which hurts us on the ball. So that's where Ancelotti's problems really shine. With Alonso, you would get that. But we have to also think about the sacrifice that Ancelotti makes. Ancelotti wants his attackers to be high. He wants his attackers to be rested. He wants his attackers to pretty much be there to change games. He doesn't want... So that midfield, those players that we mentioned, are carrying a bigger burden than they should, which is where when you see a press being triggered, you'll see that Vinicius or Mbappe, they're just looking at it, and you see Valverde jumping by himself, not being followed by anyone. That's because it's mostly players reacting to those situations because you're not really set up to do them. You are just told to, okay, if you see this situation, you're going to jump. And not when this is triggered, this player moves here, this player moves here, so you close the angles and you actually give yourself a chance to win the ball back as quickly as possible and dominate games through that, which is what I initially expected to happen. But is Alonso going to do that by his Leverkusen days? Yes. But once he steps in Madrid, and then you have players like Mbappe, Vini, Rodrigo in attack, and you're going to ask them to extra compensate off the ball, I'm not fully convinced that it's going to work. It's really... I would be way more content with something like what Zidane used to do than what an Alonso does right now. If I were to...
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, no, just jumping in on that note, for sure, it's not guaranteed that you can get Mbappe to press. But with that said, I feel like the floor with either Zidane or Alonso is at minimum doing what Zidane used to do. I feel like I feel like Alonso realizes fast, and maybe Ancelotti has just realized against Osasuna. It's possible he finally realized after Milan, like, hey, don't be too crazy. Like, maybe we tighten things up. I'm not convinced. I need to see 3-4 games in a row of not over prioritizing the rest offense, not over prioritizing this high press. I feel like with Alonso, at least he knows to keep it simple. And you know, Zidane, we saw it. He changed the whole culture of the club. He had Ronaldo defending in a Clásico. He told the stars, hey, like, you don't have to go all out, but everyone defend together, be compact together, and play together, and then change their whole team.
That's why Zidane was my example, basically. Like, best case scenario, you'll probably get a Zidane-like type of defending. Best case scenario.
I think I feel like you get the Zidane defending, and so I guess even with Zidane, you get moments under Zidane where you're a little more proactive. I guess you even get that under Carlo, but under Xabi, maybe those few 5-10 minutes you choose to be more proactive. They come out efficient, and you get clarity. I feel like the quality of player on this team is so high that Alonso doesn't have to be an upgrade in and out of possession to make us succeed. Because, like, at the end of the day, when Carlo came in from Everton, he wasn't like an upgrade on Zidane overall. There were aspects of the game that he prioritizes differently, and so he's a change. So he becomes a catalyst where Vinicius takes off. He plays faster. That's a big thing that allows Vinicius to take off. And Cruz is still there, so playing faster doesn't completely neuter our game control of games. Do you think it matters if, like, Alonso is the same in possession and just has a little more clarity out of possession. And also, I guess you could talk about whether you think Carlo's starting to find that same clarity we want from a new coach with each passing week.
All right. I'm going to start with Carlo since he's still here, if that makes sense. Well, with Ancelotti, you never know what you're getting. That's what I've learned to accept. When Ancelotti came in, I actually think his Everton was pretty decent tactically and off the ball, which he hasn't really shown that in Madrid. As you said, it's very time-based. It's very, we have to do it rather than we want to do it. I think that changes with somebody like Alonso. But ultimately, when I think of an upgrade, I think of somebody to shift culture. If you're going to give up a coach that's giving you results, then you might as well completely shift the culture of the team, the mentality. You mentioned it with Zidane. Ancelotti did it too. Is Alonso going to be able to do it? Keep in mind, Luka Modric was his teammate when we won La Decima. I'm not saying that Alonso is not a respected figure, but what I mean is that once things go wrong, Alonso doesn't really have the track record to fall back on for the players to trust, rather than somebody like Ancelotti where it was battle tested. So are you going to give up something battle tested for, we hope that Alonso is able to get these players to have more structure outside of the ball and be able to control the game on that nature? Because not necessarily you need to be the best in possession to have the angles correct at all times to control games. You can be just good enough off the ball to look at Flick's Barcelona, for example. Even though I don't like that team, it's not because they're Barcelona. I just don't see anything remarkable with them. They just don't let you breathe. And that's where the strengths lay. Flick's Bayern Munich was the same. Flick's Germany, the same. It's a matter of how the opponents are going to adapt to it. But for me, the compensation that Barcelona does, I do not like, I do not prefer. It feels a little bit like player abuse to me. And I'm not pro all that. Alonso doesn't do that. We're not going to get that with Alonso. I think that Alonso
Not like Klopp.
is for...
Klopp does that too, right? Like a little too much. Like runs them into the ground, burns them out. Their careers won't be the same after.
Because I'm thinking of this pretty young squad, right? Like, who's the oldest player from majority of the core that we're going to keep? That has to be Valverde, basically. Like, as it currently stands. And Valverde still from midfielder. We can even see with Valverde, he still has growing pains. It's a pretty young squad. But in retrospect, also Ancelotti is running them to the ground, especially somebody like Jude, where you see him defending, right?
And Fede.
Yeah. Like, those two are the biggest victims of Ancelotti, if I had to say there are Ancelotti victims. But I don't think that Ancelotti should be a much longer term of an option. I wholeheartedly agree with the idea that I hope Ancelotti wins everything this season, like he said he's going to try, and leaves. I love Ancelotti for the manager that he is and for what he's done in football. I just don't think that this squad can afford this many uncertainties that Ancelotti's football brings.
Yeah, and that's also why I'm scared of and also why I don't want Jurgen Klopp for the same reason I'm afraid of like Hansi Flick style at a club. These players, even though they're
that's
young,
his Liverpool. That's his Liverpool, though, where the technical base was, or technical floor, I want to say, was pretty low. Outside of a few players.
It was much lower. And even Dortmund, the technical level was lower than what you would get at Real Madrid.
But his Dortmund was actually a lot more on possession oriented. Like when you're thinking of Gundogan, Götze, Lewandowski, Royce, it had Błaszczykowski, Piszczek, Schmelzer, Hummels. For the most part, it had a good base technical, and I don't think they ran as much as they did, as his Liverpool did. for the most part.
Interesting. Well, they both burned out in the same way.
Yeah, they both burned out, but I think that Klopp was able to transition his Liverpool, though, which he wasn't able to transition his Dortmund.
Yes,
If it makes sense.
Definitely, and also just helped by Liverpool had more funding and resources. They brought
Yeah, of course, yeah, that's a big thing, but I don't think Liverpool spent as much on quality as much as quantity for Klopp to be able to do what he tries to do. He tried to promote a few players. He tried to bring in a few profiles here and there, but not much of a shift. Klopp was just very good at what he does. I'm actually pro Klopp when it comes to Madrid. Because
Really?
because I would actually love to see what he would do with this team.
It is fun to think about what he would do because the ceilings of his teams, like, there's no question, they're up there with any team we've ever seen. In how they play, like you go into a matchup knowing Klopp has set your team up to win. You know it's going to be exciting. You know it's going to be fun. I would worry.
Fun. It's more for the fun of it.
For sure. I would just worry for like what we've seen with Fede and Jude. That becomes like the baseline expectation in a Klopp team. In again his old teams. I admit that it could be different here.
Of course. We're just going by what we have seen. We can't really predict how they actually would tackle it, right?
Definitely. So I guess then do you think being tighter out of possession alone, because like we've seen so many times, fine, maybe Ancelotti's Everton was solid tactically, but then he comes to Real Madrid, the mandate changes. You need to be expansive in possession, effective in possession, and tight enough out of possession. And he's like not tight at all out of possession. And sometimes in possession it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. So, but that won us 2 Champions Leagues in 3 years. So it's clear that you can have flaws as a coach and win here. You don't need to be a perfect coach. You just need to be familiar with the players. I will say, yes, Alonso was teammates with Modric, but it's not the same. But Xabi was teammates with Busquets, and he did introduce briefly a cultural change at Barcelona before his lack of coaching education affected him.
But that's my fear with Alonso too.
So don't you think Alonso's coaching education has been quality, not even about Sociedad and Leverkusen, but going back to playing for Mourinho and Guardiola and Ancelotti?
Mourinho, Guardiola, Benitez, Ancelotti, like Alonso's CV is, I mean, you see a bit of all of them on him, if that makes sense.
It does.
You see a bit of Benitez, especially the way how they try to do the central cutting when they switch always to like either Frimpong or Grimaldo. Like that used to be his thing, basically, on Liverpool's midfield. Then this out of possession feels very Pep-like, very triggerish by the movement. The freedom he tries to give to the 2 players, as I said, for me, the freedom was mostly Wirtz and Boniface, where they kind of dictate how they play. The freedom that he tries to give to them, it's very Ancelotti, except that he gives them off-ball duties, unlike Ancelotti that would do with somebody like Vinicius, for example. So, but the fear in all of this is that if I had to ask Alonso, I would, if I could ask him, what's your general idea? Like, what's your general principle? Because that's what I miss with Alonso. That's where my biggest fear is with him.
So it sounds like it comes down to either, it sounds like your main qualm is he may not have a central way he wants to play. He's maybe too reactive, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's kind of like Ancelotti, like in I'm going to react to the situation where I'm in rather than I have a clear idea of what I want to do. I thought that after this summer, Alonso would have, but he's just reverting back. He's just reverting back to what works. It's not working right now for him, but he just keeps on reverting. The moment when he's making a step forward, it's another step back to go to the same place. It just feels like him with him.
So what's been going? One thing you mentioned earlier, I want to ask about. So and I guess talk a little bit about Leverkusen and what's going wrong. You said Chaka last season he used him in the sniper role. What does that mean? What did you mean with the sniper role?
The sniper role that I like to call him is basically he kind of pinpoints the weaknesses of the opponent and just shoots, and he's very accurate with the way how he takes the shot. Not an actual shot, I mean the pass, I mean his body movement, the way how he manipulates the game. That for me is kind of like a sniper, somebody that can just take you out, you're not even going to see it. Maybe it's not, maybe my analogy or the way how I'm calling him is not the right one, but it's just my thing. And the way how Granit Xhaka just plays, I really like it. It's very different from majority of the midfielders that you'll see, because you'll see the guy taking a shot from 30 meters because he's seen the goalkeeper make the wrong move, or you'll see the guy attempt to send his wing back directly into the penalty box. That's at the very least from my observation of it. Xhaka resembles a little bit of Cruz, but also Alonso's football, if that makes sense.
Definitely does. I'd say he might even be closer to Alonso than Cruz. Yeah,
yeah.
I definitely for sure. Like a little less press resistant, more of a deep. Like just range.
More of a brain, more of a not that Cruz wasn't a brain or anything, but what I mean is that the technical base of Alonso and Xhaka is going to be lower than somebody like Cruz, like the way how they ping it. So I mean, Xhaka is not as good as Alonso, but I would say the same mold of player. The Cruz, in my opinion, that was going to be for Leverkusen was going to be Aleix García. Not technically Cruz, but a player that can get the ball, move the tempo, dictate it, knows where to play the passes, knows where to move, knows where to receive, knows when to play it back, knows when to play it forward. I didn't fully expect that out of Granit Xhaka, because Xhaka, as I said, it's more of like a vertical minded. He's more reactionary, while Aleix Garcia was going to be a player that's going to be a bit more tempo oriented, a bit more sustainability, a bit more resistance against the press, but you're just not even getting that. And for me, if you're kind of killing a player like Aleix Garcia, at least if you're not capable of utilizing him to a certain extent, there are a few things wrong with your patterns, which worry me, especially if we're thinking of a coach to improve on those players rather than a coach that's just going to use those players. Because I think in terms of use those players, we have the best one possible, maybe outside of Zidane, but improve of those players, Alonso might or might not. And I have a lot of questions when it comes to that. Questions such as, why are you just very reluctant to change things? Why are you not trying new things? Why are you giving up so quickly on the things that you're trying to do?
Yeah, for sure. Maybe in possession, definitely. And the main thing it comes back to is I wonder how much, how good he is in possession. And maybe he learns. Maybe he comes here and he gets better. Maybe as you come to bigger teams, you just get better at the slower side of the game. Whereas on smaller teams, you have to play more vertical, a little faster. It's just the nature of football.
Yeah.
So comparing some of the stats, just pulling them up for our audience here. So last season, Leverkusen were at plus 1.29 expected goal difference per 90 and 2.65 points per game. This season, they are down to 0.92 expected goal difference per 90. So down by about 0.3. Still the second easily in the Bundesliga, behind only Bayern Munich, both years. And then their points per game played down 1.7. They've drawn 5 games and lost 1 of their first 10. So looking a little worse, and then just looking at XG, about the same. They're creating about the same XG per game. They're giving up 1.19 XG, So defense has gotten slightly worse. Then just looking at their build-up percentage last season, 90% build-up completion rate, 80% for the opposition. This season, still pretty high, 88-80. And then looking at the defensive line last year, 49 yards up. Or this year, 49 yards. The defensive line is the same too. Field tilt, 67% last year, 68% this year. So actually, and even the expected threat difference is almost identical, 0.9. Yeah. So it seems their defense has gotten slightly worse. And what would you speak to that? Like on mathematically, that's say defense is worse. Rest of the stats are the same.
The majority of the stats make sense from when you watch them, because a lot of people just want to kind of avoid it. But if you watch them last season to this season, you're not going to see a bigger difference. Efficiency has dropped. As you said, XG remains the same. Pretty sure they're underperforming it this season, right? Just making sure. Compared to last.
Let me confirm. This season they are at 21 goals from 21 XG, but defensively they're underperforming. So 12 expected goals against, they've given up 16. Last season.
Oh, okay. So
last season they overperformed. Last season they overperformed, 89 goals from 74 XG, and their defense also overperformed, 24 goals conceded from 30.
Yeah, but that's a much bigger sample. I'm not gonna fully play on the sample. I think that it boils down to a couple of different reasons. As we said, aggressive of the ball takes a physical and mental toll on the players. Leads to more mistakes, leads to losing the ball in more dangerous areas. It affects both sides. Usually everything in football, like I'm going to quote Jurgen Klopp on this. He goes like, when you concede a goal, there are usually 3-4 players who have made a mistake. It's never just one. And that's the way how I look at football. So I think that the physical burden and toll that they have had across all this time with Alonso is a little bit starting to show up. Because as I said, the team last season and team this season hasn't really changed much. I expected changes again by addition of Aleix García, but he's gone back to Andre because he's just saying that the physical level with Garcia and Xhaka is just not sustainable. So he needs Andre back into the team. Now he'll have a few weeks off with the international break. I want to see what he's going to be able to do. Would maybe expect that he's going to bring Aleix Garcia back into the team and try to play a little bit more on the ball. I'm going to have to wait and see on that. But in terms of the team, I just think the fatigue mentally and physically is just doing its part. And it's not much that's changed there. That's my opinion.
So you think as a season, like when for coaches like this who rely on the physicality coming off of Euros and Copa America summer, it can be hard to start the season. Do you think things get better for them? Like just they play the same and they just get better results? You think that's coming?
I think Leverkusen results are going to improve, but I don't know if they're going to be good enough for you to look at them like you looked last season. Of course, heavy football times, so it's progressively getting worse for such coaches because currently very intense football is taking like the crown, the German football, as I like to call it. It's very intense, it's very vertical, it's very high to the point. They don't leave you. Somebody, an example from Premier League would be Andoni Iraola, who was in Spain before. That type of football can work, but it has an expiry, a date which expires.
Remember the pandemic season when Liverpool were top of the Premier League and when Mourinho's Spurs were top of the league and City were down and out 2020-21 and everyone was looking at City like you're finished, and by the end of the season they just kept playing at such a walking pace all season, so they never got tired. January comes around, Liverpool start losing every game. And, I think people forget, but halfway through the 2020-21 season, it looked like Liverpool were just continuing their run of dominance almost halfway through. I think in December, And we're only in November right now. People are very much overreacting to the season. Seen so many seasons.
Yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure.
So I'm with you there. Like a very intense style can look really fun in October and November, and then January you realize like how stupid it was. Or even from us 10 years ago, 2014, 15 is a great example.
That's what we did. Yeah, I think Ancelotti has also learned from that. Every press conference this season, Ancelotti has said we lacked intensity. Literally. I'm pretty sure. Like after every bad result, he just said we lacked intensity. Which is true, but one thing that I don't like with Ancelotti is a little bit of lack of transparency when he speaks to the media. Never tackles the issue, always runs around it as easily as he can. You don't know what to expect, right? Against Osasuna, we saw, I want to say, a brilliant of the ball game. But is it too early to do that? Probably. To sustain it, I mean. One thing that I've remained firm on when people are going like the league is lost, for me, it's been that Barcelona are going to start to show cracks. And if we can be within reach, which is my fear, if we can or not, then I think that tables turn post like February, March, when it starts to peak. Because Barca already have spent a lot of energy. And Madrid has been more of like a walking pace, except that with Ancelotti this season, I'm not seeing that walking pace because
but that's what
players like Jude and Fede, they're not really walking, are they?
That's why I'm really worried because, you know, like you said, is it too early? The problem is like whether it's too early or not, we've already expended a lot of energy on these stupid results this season. We've wasted a lot of our players' young biological primes and testosterone at just running in circles with tactics that don't let you win the ball back. You know, Mbappe not cutting someone off, Jude sprinting 30 yards just for a move that like never isn't going to come off ever. So that's where I'm actually like, that's why I'm like ringing the end of his career like bell here, because the thing is there is a world where it still works because you know, the Pinzas method is real in that it is designed to let you peak little bit mid-November, December, and then once again April, May. It is not actually designed to let you peak October. So the one saving grace is like, even if Ancelotti wanted intensity, Pinzas didn't design the team to look like it did against Osasuna all season. It's not supposed to. So that's pro Ancelotti. But the worry for me is like all those games where Jude and Fede wasted their running. And not only that, maybe he looks at Osasuna and thinks, hey, let's keep pressing. Like maybe he wants to press. Maybe he says, okay, slow it down a little in possession, but the press is good. And maybe for 2 months, our in possession play gets good enough to keep him around. But our press continues frustrating our players, wasting their energy. And then maybe we get to January and he still hasn't been honest with himself about whether we need to press or not. And yeah, you can't tell from his press conference because he's never he's not trying to tell you. Or this season you can tell he seems to be very bullish on the press. Like every press conference, he's like, we need to do a better job defending. We need to be more compact, more intense.
Yeah. Ancelotti, you know, like you already covered pretty much everything when it came to Ancelotti, really, because if your idea of football and your physical team is not aligning, there's a problem. And this season we have seen that it's not aligning. Last season we saw it align, right? Like you have those peaks in between to just keep momentum. Then you did slow it down. Then from January onwards, you did show a better level at improving rate.
After the Clásico, the second half of the Clásico onwards, we were a different team. Up till the first half of the Clásico, we did look like shit last season. But we got
but a lot of people like to forget that because they're reminiscing over last season's success because they're looking at team, as you said, post that El Clásico. I know that they lost to Atletico Madrid afterwards in Copa del Rey, but for the most part, other than that and few Ancelotti mistakes, the team looked dominant enough. There are outliers, like, for example, the game against Manchester City, which we almost got a heart attack every second of that game. But ultimately, Ancelotti did just enough to win those, and we can't take that away from him.
And he was very accepting of the team's limitations in that big
Yes.
game. Like he knew you sit in a block or you have a rest offense. You don't get both.
Yeah, he pretty much just made peace with the idea that I need to win it. I don't care how I win it. Like, that's how I see Ancelotti. I need to win it. I don't care how I win it. Because he's even bullish on the fact that he says, I'm in a club that wants to win. I'm not in a club that wants to play football, on quotations. I think his line was along those. So the culture here is to win, ultimately. Like, when is last time that somebody would say Real Madrid pulled a full season playing beautiful football? Like, majority of them are probably going to go back to 2011-12 with Mourinho. Maybe, if that. So since then, it's been always like this. It's an on and off, on and off, on and off. It just depends on our energy management, emotional levels, the mental fatigue, the physical fatigue coming from. One credit that I'll give to Ancelotti is the fact that he spent the preseason only with Rodrigo and Vinicius. Didn't have majority of the other starters. I think Militao joined very late on, but he didn't really have a preseason with those players for the most part. Jude's debut this season was Atalanta. Mbappe's debut was Atalanta. Camavinga actually got injured, and he came back like, 2 months ago at this point from that injury with Tchouaméni. Tchouaméni's first game was Atalanta. Carvajal's first game was Atalanta. So that's also to factor in. I know that it's the UEFA Super Cup. We're not talking here about the Champions League final, but it was an official game against a relentlessly pressing team, which was a funny setup when you would see like the center backs in midfield, because Ancelotti didn't really know how to tackle differently Gasperini's man-to-man press. It worked in the end. If we're talking Ancelotti's successor, right? I want more of like a Klopp, Nagelsmann type of coach than an Alonso. At least that's where my stand is.
Would you say they're outright better coaches at this stage?
Yes, they are outright better coaches.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a very interesting take. I guess one question there is, I feel like Nagelsmann at Bayern, I feel like he was a little too experimental. Do you think that was just a function of the players he had there?
He was experimental on his first season, right? On the second season where he got sacked, they had cleaner ideas.
Oh, you felt his ideas got cleaner, but no striker, so he couldn't execute.
Yeah, and I also think that people are unfair at Nagelsmann when they look at this season. That man conceded 2 goals on the Champions League until he got sacked, and both of them were away at Victoria Pilsen, if I'm not wrong. He kept Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe without a goal, both legs. Barcelona without a goal, both games on a group stage. And I think it was Inter on their group too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I think that Bayern did a disservice. I think that Nagelsmann would have given Pep a much better run for his money than Tuchel did. Actually, well, crazy enough, it was my theory even back then. If people want to go on my Twitter and check, I think Nagelsmann would beat Pep that season with that Bayern team. Or at the very least, if not beat him, he would have gone toe-to-toe from first to last minute, which Tuchel just didn't do. He just didn't do. Tuchel was beaten from the first minute. He was put on a bad spot because I think it was his second or first official game. That's on Bayern's board, not on the coach. Tuchel tried to keep some of the Nagelsmann principles for those games. Actually, he reverted on the second leg to the Nagelsmann principles of that season, and it almost worked.
Yeah.
Almost, but it was a Nagelsmann approach. I didn't see much of a Tuchel after on that game. Of course, he's Tuchel executing it, which is fair enough. I have respect for Tuchel as a coach. I don't really know the right pronunciation, but that was full Nagelsmann. That's what Nagelsmann was doing all season. Like I don't like to fully make excuses for the coaches, right? Saying that Nagelsmann didn't really perform because he had no 9. For me, it's not really something that I can excuse him with, because he accepted to be in that position. When he was told you're not going to have a 9, Nagelsmann could have just walked out, but he didn't. He accepted the job. He had his periods when the team was bad, which was after the winter break that Bundesliga takes. I think he started to become a bit more experimental there, but what to me the cleanest build-up in world of football, it's still Nagelsmann's. His Bayern were just untouchable when it came to building up from the back, laying off the traps.
Other than Pep, I would say, right? Probably Pep still not.
I prefer Nagelsmann's personally to Pep's. But I mean, you would probably say that Pep has a more efficient one, but I prefer Nagelsmann's because Nagelsmann's is a bit more on my line of football, which is a bit more vertical. So the ball reaches the attackers a bit quicker with Nagelsmann rather than with Pep.
That makes
sense. That's just my preference. And
what about
if I'm thinking?
Yeah, what about his loss to Emery's Villarreal? What are your thoughts on that tie?
I mean, that was his first season where he was inexperienced. Emery is very good. I don't think he should have lost it. I think he did a lot of miscalculations. In my opinion, he lost it fair and square. That happens to coaches. And Nagelsmann was very young. But when I think of Nagelsmann at Madrid, I think of him on his second season at Bayern. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like more evolved.
Because I saw growth, even on the way how he handled players, on his press conferences. For me, it felt like he grew from that loss against Villarreal. That kind of was like a blessing to him.
It's a shame they were stuck with Sadio Mane out there, and like that's all they had. It's a shame.
Yeah, that's all what he had to work. Like Musiala was playing 9 at some point for his Bayern.
Yeah, and I think Tell had to play like at 19 or whatever, had to get more minutes because they just didn't have a featured 9. That's a very interesting take, and it is refreshing and original because the narrative right now, as you know, just there's like very Real Madrid narratives turn emotional. Like you want the coach sacked, then like 2 names pop up: Zidane, Alonso. Everyone wants them. It's also partly a function of the club. I feel like the club is always so limited with who we look at as a coach, so that feeds this narrative of like
exactly. Club feeds into that. Basically.
So like Alonso is the chosen man, the ex-player who came from the unbeaten season at Leverkusen. He's our boy, and like it has this whole like
he has an unmatched story. He has an unmatched story. If he was to become a great coach for Madrid, his legacy is just insanely like his story is a movie.
So I think I guess one area I'm bullish is he will have a better coaching career at Real Madrid than Xavi at Barcelona. That's one bet.
Yeah, because I'm willing to give that to you, but that's for me. It's also because he has better players.
Yes, for sure. I think he has better players. I think he is better educated than Xavi at Barcelona, but
he's a better coach generally better than Xavi. Yeah,
totally.
Even if Alonso was at Barcelona, I think Alonso gets better results than Xavi.
Results.
I know that Xavi won La Liga, but that La Liga, I'll say it was more gifted by Madrid than Barcelona being that extraordinarily good. They were good enough to win the league, don't get me wrong, but as I said, winner's fatigue physical fatigue, mental fatigue, all of those just played a huge part on that 22-23 season of Madrid. No Benzema for big portion of the season. Peaks of that season were nice. For example, the Camp Nou win 4-0. That was really good. That was Ancelotti introducing those artificial transitions to Madrid, which we used a lot last season. So that game remains special to me. I don't know which big game. I'm hoping it's going to be Anfield, where we see Ancelotti coming up with a strategy that is going to remain, if that makes sense. Because I don't think the Osasuna game is going to remain.
Was it? Yeah, I need to see a few of those Osasuna games, and I need to see them happen with or without injuries, and then I'll maybe believe. It's funny going back to October 2022 and the first half of when Xavi's Barcelona visited Munich, absolutely dominated Nagelsmann's Bayern, and you're like, wow, I think Xavi has something, and you maybe saw a few halves of them looking that good ever again under his time there. It was such a weird time. But executing in reality is definitely different than knowing what to do in theory. I give you that. But with that said, I guess, so like as we were talking, the story is perfect with Alonso, but executing in reality will be a much different
It's a whole different challenge.
So you think Jurgen would play, I guess, like if we're going off your thing, then Klopp is probably the best coach in the world.
The best, yes. And not the best coach in the world. I think that's Pep. But the best possible coach for Madrid is between Klopp or Nagelsmann, if I had to pick. Nagelsmann, because he would introduce a complete shift, and Klopp, because this is a tailor-made team for him.
Do you think Pep would ever work at? And he would never be here, but do you think he could do it at Madrid? I feel like Zidane became like a Pep light over time, like increasingly modeling his build-up around security. Increasingly, I would say Zidane's like second spell mid-block is a bit closer to this City mid-block we've seen the last couple of years. They are just so conservative.
I think that's where Zidane modeled his football, basically.
He did. He literally sat and talked to him after the game. I mean, Zidane, that's well known because he visited Pep at Bayern. He visited Bielsa. And then when they were sitting and talking after the game in 2020, it was him saying, hey, like, you know, my team looked like idiots. How do I stop this from happening again? And Pep's like, I'll show you, like, since you're curious. And he did. And the 2020-21, the defense was solid overall, like for a team with so many injuries. Like the floor was like always compete, always in position to win 1-0, even if the football looks horrible.
I mean, Zidane did the cultural thing of like winning above anything else, but Zidane did it in a manner of more efficient football compared to Ancelotti's.
Totally.
Like
100%.
With Zidane, you didn't feel that a game could swing at any minute. You just didn't feel that.
Yes.
It's not gonna swing.
And that seems to be what Alonso wants with all of the things he's doing as a coach. It seems he wants to be able to control, okay, like we need to respond, then we have a setup in place. If we need to defend, we have a setup in place. But I guess I keep getting back to this narrative idea you put out where we have it in our head that Alonso is this idealistic coach, this Mourinho Pep hybrid made in heaven, like designed for us. Maybe he is, though. Maybe he is.
Look, I would love that. I love Alonso. I've always loved Alonso. One of my all-time favorite players, but it also feeds to the fear of, I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think he's ready. Personally speaking, I just don't think he's ready.
Interesting. I think what happens is whether he's ready or not, the board didn't think Zidane was ready 10 years ago. And I think where they're at now is, I'm pretty sure if you look at their short list, those two are probably two of the only ones on the short list, the way they operate. But
the Zidane problem is mostly like, you know, the internal problems that he had with the board. That would be a bit of an issue. I don't know if they have ever resolved the Ceballos thing, which has gone on for so long now.
What was the Ceballos problem?
I mean, Zidane didn't want Ceballos. Jose Angel Sanchez brought him in, and Zidane just decided to be petty about it, I guess. And it went on from there. And I think Ceballos suffered from it because I'm pretty sure that Ceballos didn't see a minute for like 6 months that season.
Yeah, that's crazy. The problems run deep just because like Zidane has always wanted like too deep every position, rotatable squad. Bored on someone like Carlo, who's like, I'll coach whoever you give me.
Yeah. I think Zidane would coach for as long as those players fall more in line with what he needs. For him, it's not, I want Pogba, so you give me Pogba, right? But if I want Pogba, give me something like Pogba, because that's my idea. Does it make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, I think with Zidane, a lot of it is the winning over all else. So I think he wants like more than even give me something like Pogba. It's like he wouldn't go into a season without like with these center backs. Like he would rip into the board. He would lose his shit in the meetings if they made him go a season like this.
I think he would he would have probably asked to leave.
Oh yeah, he would have asked to resign and mutual.
If they told him like end of the season, your center back replacement for Nacho, who I don't rate, but it's Nacho, of course, very experienced, solid player, is going to be Jesus Vallejo, who hasn't played football for 6 months priorly, then yeah, you know that's ending badly with Zidane.
For sure. And he'd definitely be like, hey, I brought you the Champions League. Like, screw you, for sure.
And that's why he gave up the first time round, because he knew that he's not going to get enough changes to the team to be able to keep them up, be as successful. He holds himself to that standard, which I appreciate a lot. And that's why he hasn't taken another job, because he either wants best of the best or nothing at all.
Yes, 100%. And when you start your career coaching that Galactico team that wins the three-peat, like everything will seem like boring in comparison.
Yeah.
And I think, and he always knows what's right for the club. I guess if he's not taking the job, you almost wonder, did the other guy just say yes to whatever the board demanded of him? With Zidane, I mean, we can go on and on, but culturally, he chose the players. Perez couldn't choose the team when Zidane was around because he's Zinedine Zidane.
I just don't buy into that narrative, to be honest. Sorry to cut you off.
That the Perez chooses the team.
Yeah, I don't buy that.
He doesn't now, but under before Zidane, he did. Like it wasn't a narrative, but before Zidane,
I like to think that he wanted his own quotations puppets back then, so he would have like more control. But I think that he gave that up the moment when he saw like this isn't really gonna work, if it makes sense.
So I don't think he did. Like, well, at least just from where I've researched this a lot, and it seems like Zidane overturned him because the 4-0 loss in November 2015, he back then and before that, I believe he would tell the coach the starting 11. The coach would sometimes be like, I'm not sure who I'm playing this game, and in like Clasico. And Perez, there's a famous report where it's like, some journalist said Perez told him like, you have to. This is the team. What do you mean? Like, what's the decision to be taken? Like acting like, why are you confused about tactics, bro? Like, we signed these expensive players, go play them. That was the when Benitez played James, and I think it was James, Cruz, Modric in the 4-0 loss.
James, Cruz, Modric. Yeah.
I believe that was the last game Perez did that. But it was only, I believe it was only for Clásicos, for what it's worth. Only like certain big games. It wasn't like every week. Hey,
yeah. He's not handing the team sheets every week.
Yeah. He's not doing that. But it was like for about 15 years after he started, it was like big games. If he didn't see the guy he spent money on the field, he could definitely have a word with the coach. Zidane was the first guy where if that call came in, Zidane would probably leak it to the press and get Perez in trouble back. Like he would fight back, or he wouldn't have it. He wouldn't even get there. It wouldn't even get to the point where it gets to the press. Zidane would shut it down. He'd be like, okay, fire me. Like, if you don't want me to fall, like, and Perez can't fire him. But I guess my point with this was, when they hired him, the other report was when they hired Zidane, it was that they were talking about who was going to have to fire him because they didn't think he was good. I think his success has emboldened them, where they see Xabi as a second Zidane 10 years later, retired, like, different generation of players.
Yeah. But if
Different coaching schools.
if you're gonna consistently try to rely on fairy tales, it's not really the best idea. Like, that's where my problem is with all of this, because they want a fairy tale. They want another big legend coming back, winning it all, creating a legacy for himself.
Yeah, that's what they want.
As I said before, I would just much rather take a proven coach that can do his job, give the guy a bit more time. I don't think he's ready. I'll stand by that. He personally, just a personal opinion, I'm no who am I to Xabi Alonso? But I'll say I'll need to see it to believe it, that he's ready. I don't see it. I just don't. I wouldn't want Alonso's tenure to even come remotely close to Xavi's at Barca.
Yes, that we can agree on for sure. We don't want that to happen. Unfortunately, I don't think your other two candidates are on the list at all. But if you look at our shortlist, but our shortlist,
our shortlist has like two coaches, which is Alonso and Zidane. Basically, if I had to pick, I'm still picking Zidane out of these two. Oh my god!
Oh, that's interesting.
If people are listening, they want to kill me right now. Because of the football, I'm pretty sure, not because of the results. But people want more dynamic football. They want to see the team be more dynamic, while Zidane is a little bit more reluctant. He puts
I don't care
more
about
emphasis.
That.
Yeah, no. I'm talking majority of people, right? Not
sure,
you on this, but majority of people. Because people wanted me dead when I supported Zidane after Atleti spanked us in preseason. But yeah. Like I literally was getting harassed.
That was a crazy time.
So that's a common theme with Madridistas, right? So saying right now, Zidane, who's been out of job since pretty much the Chelsea debacle that happened against Tuchel, to Alonso, who just won Bundesliga in a very emotional fashion, took a team almost, I think they either were like on relegation zone or just right above it when Alonso came. And he actually beat Nagelsmann, pretty sure, on that first season. There are a lot of things that do make sense with Alonso. I'll never dispute it. I'll never argue against it. But there are things that I just wouldn't like for them to be rushed. This team has longevity. If you can maintain the core of players, of course, few are going to leave here and there. But for the most part, I think that you have a team. We're pretty good at establishing players to stay here for long. I would like to believe that we do that very well. Players do stay in Madrid for a very long time. Like Ronaldo, Ramos, Marcelo, Carvalho, Modric, Cruz. Majority of these players do stay for a very long time. It's the players that just aren't sure of their position, that have tendencies of moving, like your Kovacic that moves back then because he didn't know, or your James. We have tendencies of being able to keep our superstars for a very long time. So I don't think that Alonso is never going to coach a Jude Bellingham or a Camavinga. I think he will.
For sure. And that's actually why I would like I feel like Zidane's a safe pair of hands, but I want these two to be our next two coaches. But that's also for the same reason is why I don't mind waiting for Zidane. I feel like the quality is so high that we win no matter who we bring on. And maybe you take a risk on Alonso and then you have a safe pair of hands no matter what. After Zidane, I guess Alonso is also more experienced. Well, if your shortlist is only two coaches, then you're always going to be a little restricted in who you can go after.
I'm just afraid that the third option is going to be Raul, which I don't think, but I'm afraid of that.
What about Mourinho? He's always an option.
Yeah, I mean for our fans, yeah, but I think it's pretty settled in Turkey right now.
No, yeah, he's not technically an option, but he always shows up in the media every time. If you notice, because Perez only needs three guys.
Doesn't he work with Jorge Mendes to a certain extent.
Yes.
Still,
Yeah.
so it makes sense, right? It's just media narrative coming from Mendes. Really, I'm used to that with like even Ronaldo when Ronaldo was here, using Edu Aguirre every moment which they could. I don't like Jorge Mendes because he kind of made me panic of my young self a lot with Ronaldo. So that's it. Like every year we had to deal with transfer rumors. This isn't going right. That isn't going right.
I'm sad.
So yeah, I'm sad. That was like people think like I know that there are going to be a few listeners that come from my account that I hate Cristiano Ronaldo. People think that I have guys' shirts like on my place. I used to love him. How can you not, given what he did, right? The moment when he broke my heart is the game against Granada, when he just goes like, "I'm sad. I'm not happy." That was a power play by him, which I never liked. And then he goes on right before a Champions League final and says, "I don't know what's going to happen with my future."
That was after. That was after they won.
So who was first? Bale?
Both were right after winning. Both immediately after winning were immediately in the.
Yeah.
Both were right after, within like 20 minutes of each other, which was why it was so shocking.
Yeah.
After winning it, the third straight.
Like that's why I just don't see Ronaldo the same way how a lot of people see him, and that doesn't take away from his quality or the fact that he's the greatest Real Madrid player that I have ever watched. That doesn't take away from it, but just that personality, that it has to be about him, which I know that he's there because of that, but I'm also fine with not really liking it. Like a lot of people are putting that on Mbappe. I don't know where they've seen it, to be honest. I don't know where they're getting the patterns so far.
A little bit of it at PSG with the way the last contract he signed gave him the power over the club. I think that last one.
The club tried to show him though, and they still are pushing the media. Like
they're trying hard.
The thing is that I don't like Mbappe for that contract, but benefit of the doubt there, our president still signed him. So some people don't seem to understand that PSG are feeding the narrative that he was the villain. It's not Mbappe's trying to feed anything to the media. It's PSG doing that every single day. Do I think Mbappe has an ego? Yeah. All of these players do have an ego. Like, it doesn't matter how they're appearing. They do have an ego. They carry themselves a certain way, and that's why they are as great as they are. But when people are drawing parallels to Mbappe is behaving like Ronaldo, but he's not giving us Ronaldo results, I'm just not seeing it. I'm not seeing Mbappe behaving like Ronaldo, and I don't think Mbappe is going to give us the Ronaldo results because I don't think Mbappe is as good of a footballer.
He's not. He's not as good as the best version of Ronaldo.
Yeah.
A lot of people see it because of stats, but like not. He's never been as good a player. We've seen that.
If you watched 2009, I want to say, to 2013, Cristiano, before the knee injuries and pretty much the legs started to become heavy. If you saw that level of Ronaldo, if you got to experience that week in and out, like I had the pleasure to experience it, then you're not sitting there and telling me that Mbappe is ever going to be that good. He's not. Like, that's the reality. In terms of numbers themselves, Mbappe might or might not reach those numbers. I don't know.
That's where I feel like we need a Klopp maybe to get there, or like you've persuaded me. We might need someone who is the highest caliber of offensive coach. Because with Zidane, he came in and he really optimized for that late version of Cristiano so well. And he did it very well. But it wasn't hard, but now Mbappe can't head the ball, so immediately you need more coaching sophistication.
Zidane had more tools like Marcelo and Carvajal as wing backs. He had the Bale if he wanted to play with a right winger, or he had an Isco if he wanted more central control. It's a bit different now. But one thing that I'm not understanding still is the usage of Mbappe by Ancelotti. Just being honest here. And it doesn't make sense to me.
So do you think Alonso uses him better? You think he finds
No.
You don't think Alonso knows how to use him better? Why not?
I just look how Leverkusen attacks. I just don't think so.
Interesting.
You want to limit Mbappe's touches. Ultimately,
you don't want him to involve him too much.
If you want Mbappe to be the most efficient, you want to limit his touches. Like everybody speaks about Mbappe's peak being against Madrid, right? Under Pochettino. Like that might have been his best game on PSG shirt, at least on a big stage.
His peak was Tuchel, though, under Tuchel, not under.
But that game specifically. People look at that game.
They do. They think his dribbling is what he needs to do, which is so dumb.
Yeah. Every touch of that game felt like I'm really scared. It felt the same way for me. I can imagine for the players, right? But that was a player with limited touches. Like Mbappe's touches were coming at exactly where he wants them to be. He was taking them front-footed. He was able to bring it down. And he had control over the actions. I think that's what Ancelotti is trying to do. Pretty sure that Mbappe right now is our most efficient dribbler, which on itself, it doesn't speak well. I think Mbappe and Vini should be like close to one another. Last time I checked the data, Mbappe was higher than Vini. So that for me, to begin with, it's not good news. It's not good usage. And I think that Alonso would rather go that route too, considering how he uses Boniface, rather than a Klopp way or a Nagelsmann way, where they would have given a more sophisticated on-ball emphasis to the players on the deeper lines, so the touches of Vinicius and Mbappe would be as limited as possible on useless areas. Not useless, every area has a use, but where you don't want your attackers to touch the ball. I don't want Vinicius to come back at Mendy and get the ball and have to dribble past 3 to 4 players. That's a waste of energy. I want them.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say with Zidane, it goes one of two ways. One way, he sees Mbappe for what he is. He goes the late stage Cristiano route and limits his touches as well. Differently, obviously, because you don't have Benzema, you don't have Marcelo Carvajal, you do it differently. Or B, my worry with Zidane is it ends up closer to his second spell where we're very positional and the wingers are not that effective because we're so focused on efficiency that we don't give them enough options. So my worry with Zidane is that it can go both ways. Any thoughts on that?
Or maybe he makes a mix of both. Because I think this team is the most suited to be now a mix of both. It doesn't really have good fullbacks, sadly. But for Zidane, it would play on his favor because I think that Zidane would get his game to the wings.
Yeah, and he would use the fullbacks for defensive possession and circulation.
Yeah. So he would probably play Mendy, as sad as that is, if Mendy is the only option. Again, we don't know what's going to happen next summer. He would play Mendy, but he would give Mendy some guidance. As in, keep it simple, keep it basic. This is where we have to take the ball. Mendy, if we get Trent at right back, things change a lot.
I wonder how that goes, but I think every coach figures it out with him one way or the other. He like you have a fit problem with Mbappe. With Trent, it's just like do your thing, man. I think every coach, every system, he works.
Like I just think sometimes of just how Ancelotti's keeping Vini and Mbappe sometimes just high up against the defenders.
With Trent
and I
around.
just think that Yeah, I just think that, okay, the ball is going wide right now. You just know that it's being pinged. I mean, okay, people can clip this. Wait until David Alaba starts playing. You're going to see a lot of that. And I'm going to love it.
A lot of pinging the ball vertically.
Yeah, a lot of straight up ball into the space like we saw against Osasuna with where Lunin did, right? Like, you're going to get a lot of quick vertical play where the ball is going to go high immediately and the team is going to push. Rather than we're trying to circulate, but we don't really know how to circulate it without playing it too vertically, so we don't know what we're doing. I think that Alaba is going to bring a little bit more identity to the team. I think his on-ball qualities are going to matter a lot to this team.
Yeah, as long as Carlos abandoned the press by then, it should work out. As long as he's not still trying to press when Alaba comes back and we lose. But
I mean, depends on Alaba's. I mean, probably I said something that's going to happen in February, right? Like,
unfortunately with Alaba, it feels like this is one of those like ACLs where you add 1 year to every timeline, not like one of the worst recoveries. So I would say like this Alaba is like, this is more of an idea now. And I don't know when we'll ever see him play again. I wouldn't assume this season, to be honest.
Really?
Because the recovery, my understanding is like the Militao within 3 to 4 months, 80% of the recovery is happening. So the first, like, I just did the Carvajal injury like 2 weeks ago, by the way. Same thing, playing football. The night after the Clásico, I went and I hyperextended my knee. And the first week or two, most of the recovery happens. After a few months, you can walk. It's just getting back to playing football is where most of the like recovery work takes place to do high intensity. And Alaba, it seems like for about a year now, they've said, hey, he hasn't like made that first big leap forward. Like he's had problems in the initial recovery phase. So I think his career in that scenario, it's not the same as getting 2 ACLs like Militao, but how different is it? He hasn't even come back. It's November. Militao came back and got his second injury. In fact, I would argue Alaba probably gets back to 100% closer to when Militao is back, if going off the timelines, anything. Just because
my theory always was that either this year or next year, one of Alaba or Rudiger gets shipped. I mean, now we know who, but that was always my theory.
We can't even ship him now, I don't think, because of the injury until he's.
I mean, he's definitely going to get back on pitch this season, but I'm not sure what's going to happen. And my idea always was like, because right now we're working on speculation, right? Not signing a center back. For me, always was that there's Alaba. I thought the club sees it that way. If things go wrong with Alaba, then Tchouaméni is going to fill in. I thought they always saw it like that. If they saw it as we have Tchouaméni and Alaba might or might not come back, boy, that's a bad plan.
I think the way they saw it was Alaba may or may not come back. Let's bet on him coming back. Let's hope. Let's bet on our players like last season. It was not too different to the calculus of last season, but slightly worse. And, you know, because they bet, like their hubris and pride got in the way. Like they're like, hey, we bet on our talents taking us all the way last season. Let's bet on it again. And yeah, they knew. And also they were trying to get Lenny Yoro, who Jorge Mendes messed up.
Yeah,
you know,
Jorge Mendes sent him to United. Yeah.
I blame him for that. But I guess
yeah.
So I guess we should probably close out here.
Yeah.
I guess for your closing thoughts, so I guess to summarize for viewers, like Aleix García, one of the best playmakers in La Liga, going to Leverkusen and not being featured, it's November 11th, is a pretty giant red flag towards Alonso's aptitude as coach, is your overall argument, because you need central.
I mean, he was a starter, but he got dropped because it wasn't working out. So for me, it just feels like I don't think he's ready to coach Madrid. It's not only Aleix García. I had this opinion even last year. I mean, I do want him, but I would love the best version of him, which I don't think we would get it. If I'm in place of Perez and whoever is making the decisions, Joss and all the board. I take Klopp out of that Red Bull, whatever role he took. I give him the contract and tell him to sign it. Or I take Nagelsmann out of the Germany. If those are not feasible, I would either take a shot at Andoni Raiola or Michel. All of these are options above Alonso for me.
Very interesting take. So we're gonna close out here on that note. Definitely go for us as a club. I wonder what the conversations look like behind the scenes. What do they talk about? Are they worried about build-up? Do they even care, or are they just like, "Hey, Alonso, come be our next year for our mythical man that continues our marketing next decade." Thank you, listeners, for coming on for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Different take at Xabi Alonso.
Thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Definitely.